Thank you to the students and staff of Jesus and Mary College and their Political Science Association for inviting me to share some thoughts on gender equality and women's empowerment, UN Women at 10, the dedicated entity of the United Nations, and a post-COVID-19 future for women and girls. I see you as empowered, educated, young women of India going on to join the labor market and the next stage of your life. You must go out into the world as feminists, Nariwadis. As political scientists, you are aware of the history of feminist movements. You must know that gender equality and women's empowerment, like charity, begins at home, as does your fight for it. You have to wage what Gloria Steinem called 1 million mutinies every day in your families, in school, in colleges, and then in the community as an employee, worker, as entrepreneur, as political leader, social activist, as wife and mother of both boys and girls, and in all your relationships. Many roles await you. Carry the torch in each one. That's my first big message to you. The second message is support and believe in the United Nations. And I know many of you are keen to serve in it. I wish you all success in that. You also asked me what inspires me about the UN and serving the world through it. After 28 years in IFS, serving my country, I moved to the UN for 15 years, serving in different capacities, but most importantly, in the leadership team of UN Women, building the institution ground up. 3 aspects of working for the UN I have cherished. First, the power of ideas to change the world. Ideas of equality or egalitarianism may sometimes seem like a pie in the sky or iconoclastic. But these are noble projects of humanity, of civilizational value. They may seem unattainable or too theoretical at the time. But the joy and satisfaction it gives when it takes seed and grows and becomes a transformative movement is unmatched. Mind you, there are the lows when cynics and so-called practical people tell you these are lost causes. The development of poorer countries in an unfair economic system, or the achievement of gender equality and women's empowerment in a misogynist world. You are tested in keeping faith, and every step that you take towards it is a victory. You can't imagine my satisfaction when I succeeded in pushing for the adoption of SDG 5, when I met empowered survivors of sexual violence at UN-conceived one-stop crisis response centers. We make a difference. And we can make a difference. That's the message. The excitement and challenges of working in a multinational and multicultural environment with the 3 UNs, member states, secretariat, and civil society, public, sets UN working experience apart. It's a rich amalgam of national experiences, realities, idiosyncrasies, and their wisdom. But equally, the politics of contending worldviews and ideologies and different concepts of work ethics and styles. So be prepared for a bumpy but exhilarating ride with seat belts on. You are being tested all the time on your convening and advocacy powers. How you proselytize to the unconverted to UN's causes. Being in an echo chamber of like-minded is comforting, but to go outside the comfort zone and speak truth to power without provoking a backlash is the litmus test. I have had to do that a lot when politely critiquing the developed country governments on their aid or trade policies, or all governments on the shortcomings in the gender equality policies and implementation. In UN Women, I remember such an occasion when I had to contradict Evo Morales, then hugely popular and longest serving president of Bolivia and chair of the group of 77 who helped us convene the first ever G77 conference on gender equality and women's empowerment. And in his speech to a hall full of 1,500 indigenous Bolivian women activists cheering him on, he asserted that he did not believe in having a dedicated ministry for women's affairs and that he had mandated every ministry to do their part to advance gender equality. Now, this presented a dilemma of my contradicting him in my speech, which was to follow. So, using my Spanish translation excuse, I made a strong pitch from the podium to contradict him. Excellency, I said, you have been a champion, he for she, and we applaud what you have done. We also believe that as per the Beijing Platform for Action and as empirically proven on the ground, the best way to advance gender equality under your committed leadership is to have a strong, empowered, well-resourced and independent women's ministry, and in addition have each ministry accountable on delivering for women and girls, empowerment and human rights. Now, though his aides were taken aback that I had dared to contradict him, our local representative and women activists were happy. I advocated upfront for it and got away with impact. So now let me turn to what is feminism and who is a Narivadi. Feminism is about recognizing the equality and full humanity, and I want to emphasize this, of women and men, accepting that they are not children of a lesser God and have a right to enjoy economic and social rights, civil and political rights, and the right to live a life of dignity without discrimination and violence in equality with men. That biological differences, the reproductive function which is often held out as making that inequality, does not condemn them to secondary roles in any or all other spheres. A Narivadi is one who recognizes and lives this principle in his, her daily life and throughout the life cycle, both of men and women. They are agents for transforming a centuries-old patriarchal, gender unequal society in politics and creating a new normal. These days we hear a lot about the new normal of COVID. However, this is the feminist one. Now, the feminist movement arose in the West, but we have had our own feminist movement, models of rulers and leaders and women's activists. Lakshmi Bai, Sarojini Naidu, Savitri Bai Phule, Ramabai Ranade, Indira Gandhi, Veena Majumdar, and my personal heroes whom I know, Devki Jain, Kamla Bhasin, Rehana Jhabwala, Sunita Dhar of Jaguri, Rehana Jhabwala of Seva, to younger activists like Trisha Shetty, Shaili Chopra, Anurita Hazarika, Priyanka Sami, Japlin Pasricha, Gayatri Sharma. We have the most inspiring and committed women's movement and feminist advocates, and South Asia networks linked to global networks. And they command a lot of respect in global feminist movement. Now, we all need feminism. A woman who says she does not might need to be reminded of her own privilege before she makes this kind of judgment. Even those who have not experienced the more brutal effects of patriarchy have experienced sexism, overt or covert. Feminism isn't about the individual. It's not about you on your own. It's about all of us. It's fairer for women, but also because all, including men on this planet, will all be better off. UN's historic contribution to gender equality is something that I want to highlight today, since you are celebrating UN at 75. The UN has been driving the gender equality agenda globally, and it's a great achievement. The Commission on the Status of Women, founded almost at the inception of the UN, as a powerful organ of the ECOSOC, has played a sterling role as a unique, largest global platform to bring together policy makers and other stakeholders for dialogue and norms and standard setting on gender equality and women's empowerment. CSW has been an engine of normative development. The transformative concepts of gender mainstreaming and the CEDAW Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, a treaty that is now signed by 187 out of 193 countries and holds them accountable to report on how they are upholding its tenets, is a product of CSW. 4 path-breaking UN World Conferences for Women were held, and the last Beijing Platform for Action of 1995 is still a gold standard in government commitments to advance women's rights in the 12 major areas of action, including poverty eradication, economy, education, health, violence against women, power and decision making, media, environment, and institutional mechanism, the women ministries, which I referred to earlier. Now, what is the role of UN Women? The fulcrum, I call it, of the new feminist order. My talking about UN Women is like a mother describing her child, for I have had the privilege to nurture this institution from its birth for 7 out of its nearly 10. I have been involved in building that institution ground up and driving its mandates of norms and standard setting, UN system coordination, a holistic knowledge and training hub, an engine for impactful programs on the ground in countries, regions, and also influential advocate, a vibrant partner and force multiplier of a people's movement for cultural and social norm change or gender equality with civil society and women's movement. Now, in that avatar, UN Women inspired millions of men and women, institutions and leaders everywhere to value, own, and invest in gender equality within their families, communities, and as a national and global public good essential to achieve other critical public goods. UN Women enabled great leaps in global norms and standard setting on gender equality across core areas of economic empowerment, voice participation and leadership, ending violence against women, and promotion and protection of their human rights. It reinforced the motherboard of gender equality norms and standards and pushed the frontiers in contested areas like sexual and reproductive health and rights. Like, it forged a veritable global gender equality compact among member states, private sector, and civil society based on these norms. It ensured that gender equality and women's empowerment is an end in itself, but also mainstreamed into every area of UN's main projects for humanity of peace and security, including countering terrorism, by the way, human rights, sustainable development, and disaster humanitarian response. It made history by organizing the first ever global summit on gender equality with 70 heads of state and government and 165 countries committing to implement this gender equality compact that I've talked about. It got member states to adopt a comprehensive, transformative, and dedicated Sustainable Development Goal 5 on achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. And I want to emphasize that, inclusivity, with 9 meaningful targets and cross-cutting targets in 11 other SDGs of Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. There were breakthrough commitments in areas such as unpaid care work and domestic work sharing and provision. Thorough Beijing Plus 20 and 25 reviews were organized globally, regionally, and at the national levels, and path-breaking gender equality resolutions in the United Nations General Assembly, in the UN Security Council, I already mentioned Commission on the Status of Women, ECOSOC, and other UN bodies pursued to become high standard soft law on gender equality. Rio Plus 20 on sustainable development, Paris climate change, financing for development, Habitat 3 on urban development. These and other global agreements were also engendered thanks to UN Women. Importantly, UN Women led a UN system coordination juggernaut to get over 66 departments, 68 actually, specialized agencies and Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, and WTO to submit to a gender equality policy and practice regime. They committed to making gender equality an integral part of their missions and to be held accountable to deliver for women and girls through innovative UN system-wide action plan, UNCT SWAP, Young Way Gender Parity Pacts, and these were all joined and by all these agencies, but also led by the Secretary General of the United Nations at the top. UN Women identified for partnership what it called game changers: the private sector, religious leaders, youth, men and boys, media and academia, and the whole of society of approach. The private sector committed to women's empowerment principles in their companies, in the marketplace and in communities, and to SDG 5 implementation. And we rang the bell for gender equality in the stock exchanges around the world. Intra and interfaith platforms for positive interpretation of gender equality norms were established, and women religious leaders and advocates encouraged. Youth Leap strategy was used as an intergovernmental pole vault into gender equal norms, and there is right now a Generation Equality Now campaign going on, and I hope you join it. The He for She movement was a remarkable success in galvanizing men and boys to stand up for gender equality, with 1.3 billion worldwide signing up. Partnerships with new and old media covered women's portrayal, it is very important, participation and leadership issues. The women's movement got unprecedented support and ballast, and public opinion was influenced through Step It Up for Planet 50/50 and several other advocacy campaigns and people's marches. Challenges now, of course, they abound for gender equality achievement. The 10th anniversary challenge for UN Women is how to have more program presence on the ground. The task of dismantling centuries of gender discrimination is daunting, neglected for so long, resource intensive, and now crisis hobbled, that UN Women and its missionaries like you are needed ever more. All must work for gender equality action and transformative financial investment, technology enablement, mass movement, and political commitment that the project needs and deserves from all. We must all do more to banish gender unjust and discriminatory laws, but also psychosocial mindsets and dismantle structural barriers. And we did many things to accelerate progress, and there is progress normatively, most of all, but practically it is incremental, stop-go, uneven, and insufficient. And we even see backlash and regression in some respects and countries. And this was very much shown up in the Beijing Plus 25 Global Review that is just finished, and the World Economic Forum Mind the Gap or Mind the Gender Gap report, which has just been released. And it has shown that we are nowhere near achieving gender parity globally in the economy, society, and in political power. At this rate, we won't be able to achieve gender equality in this century. That means in the next 80 years, let alone by 2030. The pandemic-related multi-sectoral crisis has added new challenges, including acceleration of tech economy 4.0 related future of work challenges. I believe that UN Women is engaged in assessing the disproportionate and differential impact on women and girls, and to support government and multi-stakeholder strategies for mitigation and relief recovery and reliance, building back better and building anew to ensure they centrally incorporate women's empowerment purposes. All of government and all of society commitment and action is now needed. The post-COVID world and gender equality are, the two new normals that we want to converge. There are more young people in the world than ever before, and they are critical members of the global society driving forward ideas, innovations, and movements. The youth, are also on the front lines of other major economic transformations across the global economy, including digitalization, automation, climate action, and many, many other movements. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently warned that the world faces a generational catastrophe that could waste untold human potential, undermine decades of progress, and exacerbate entrenched inequalities. At the same time, let me remind ourselves that COVID-19 pandemic has brought us to the most creative destruction moment in society, economy, and governance in this century for the world and India. While gender equality straddles all areas, it is upon us to ensure that we emerge on the other side of the pandemic, creating a new normal of gender equality that feminists have been dreaming of. PM Modi's government has always center-staged women's empowerment in its programs and policies and has emphasized women-led development as much as women's development and women in development. This conception also informs Atmanirbhar Bharat and related economic stimulus packages in their three avtaras. That is, in providing relief and mitigation, in revival and recovery, and rebuilding back better and building anew. In the same spirit, it must drive the 5 pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat: demographic dividend, demand, infrastructure, systems, and reform. Women and youth are critical determinants and beneficiaries of success in these areas. Women and girls must be empowered through targeted funds and programs, the continuation of existing special programs, and through gender mainstreaming and transversal programs that ameliorate the hardships imposed by the pandemic and lift all women and men. Now, Atmanirbharta is about fostering Atmanirbhar women and girls, their dignity and rights through women's economic empowerment and autonomy, through education and all the related areas. Therefore, related government, private sector, civil society, multi-stakeholder strategies, plans, programs, institutions, ecosystems, and most importantly, transformative investments must focus on kindling what I call the 7 chakras or energy centers of women's empowerment towards a gender equal post-COVID-19 economic renaissance of India itself. The first chakra is to forge gender responsive and women-led disaster management and humanitarian response strategies. This disaster isn't over, and there are many others always around the corner. They must meet the particular needs of women and girls: menstrual hygiene products, contraceptives, midday meals for girls not going to school, food and rations, distance education, and cooking gas access. These are some examples. Domestic violence response services and social services must also be provided as essential services, whatever happens. Women must get entrepreneurship opportunities and employment from what we call the crisis response industry. The PPE kits, mask making, home delivery services, cooking meals for public distribution, care services, the whole lot, the health sector, which is what I'm going to come to. The second chakra is holistically addressing the intersectionality of marginalized women's multiple identities. As a Dalit, as tribal, as rural, disabled, migrant, and poor women, and empowering them economically with entrepreneurship and decent work. So none is left behind. And of course, I should mention education first of all through all of this. And so that none is left behind, that is the whole essence of Antyodaya. These categories of women need to be compensated for their loss of livelihood through Manrega, but also targeted for support through the Jan Dhan, MSME, Swanidhi, financing, PMAY, migrant worker support funds, and other anti-poverty and resilience building measures. The third chakra must integrate, foster, value, and even privilege women's skills, labor, enterprise, and leadership in reinvigorated agriculture, manufacturing, and services sector supply chains, and rural and urban infrastructure building. Targeted and mainstreamed measures, incentives, and scaled up transformative investments by government and private sectors are required to spur women's fuller participation in the workforce and in bridging the entrepreneurship gender gulf in size, scope, scale, risk-taking, and diversity. The fourth chakra must enable technological empowerment of women and girls to benefit from and contribute to an equitable new normal of accelerated fourth industrial revolution and digitized artificial intelligence driven economy, world of work and entrepreneurship. Women's participation in the digital, AI and gig economy and high-tech jobs benefiting from flexible zero-hour work and sharing of unpaid care work, domestic work by men, which we have experienced to some extent during this crisis, are positives that must be harvested and carried forward into the new normal. The fifth chakra must ensure universal access of women and girls to healthcare, including to sexual and reproductive health. PM Modi's digital health card, Ayushman Bharat, Jan Aushadhi centers, etc. are steps in that direction. A revamped and expanded health, medical and pharmaceutical infrastructure and services with enhanced 3% of GDP investment must be powered by women's entrepreneurship, employment and leadership. The sixth chakra of 21st century gender responsive education and training systems must enable all women and girls to access quality education, and effective implementation of the new education policy of India must close the persisting literacy, numeracy, primary, secondary, tertiary, higher and digital education and skills related gender gaps. Unfortunately, the list is so long. It must foster their multi-sectoral knowledge, vocational skills, STEM talent, and I really want to emphasize STEM, and employability, and create a women's skills bank at all levels. A value chain of education to employment to entrepreneurship. The seventh chakra of transformation is normative, cultural and behavioral change at individual, societal and corporate, government, national and global levels. SDG 5 must be the template for overhauling and implementing post-pandemic policies and laws, systems and norms, including through gender-responsive budgeting and financing. So the whole reform must be driven by this. Patriarchal attitudes and structural barriers must be part of the baggage to be destroyed. The full potential of India's greater 50% women and girls must be tapped if India has to achieve its $5 trillion economy by 2025 ambition, bucking the COVID shock that it has got. McKinsey estimates that women's empowerment and gender parity is expected to boost India's GDP by nearly 800 billion by 2025. demonstrating that Bharat cannot be Atmanirbhar and Shresht without the full deployment of the energy and talent of its women workers, entrepreneurs, and creators of both society and economy. So, from catcalling to mansplaining to inappropriate sexual jokes, young women like you face sexist and disrespectful behaviors in public and private places on a daily basis. Don't tolerate it or be apathetic. Disrupt the status quo. Challenge your peers. Call out inappropriate behavior in a safe, respectful manner. Next thing I want to tell you, next time you are browsing the bookstore or settling in for a movie night, consider something written or directed by women and for women and of women. We can amplify the voices of the women and feminists rewriting this narrative by watching, listening, reading, and investing in the media content that they produce. This makes a big mindset change in yourself and it spreads around. Shatter stereotypes of internalized beliefs in your place, worth, and society as dependent, vulnerable, and incapable. Sky is the limit to your achieving your full potential. Encourage yourself and other girls to speak out and assert themselves. Counter narratives that mislabel bossy for bold or bold for bossy. Show them their thoughts matter by asking their opinions and listening when they speak. Let them know there is no wrong or right way to be a girl or woman. Though beauty standards vary from place to place, they almost always promote a narrow, unrealistic vision of femininity, resulting loss of body confidence and inordinate emphasis on appearance. Rethink your beliefs on what it means to be beautiful. Educate the men in your network and family on a man's role in feminism. 2. Change stereotypical division of labor and share care and domestic work. Secondly, get them to listen to women and others who are oppressed by patriarchal systems and values, and you yourself do that. Use your privilege and others to benefit women and girls, and call out misogyny when they see it. Be a he for she in every way. So tell your men all of that. Emma Watson, during her September 2014 he for she launch speech, invoked another woman, what she had said, and called upon young men and women to ask the question, if not me, who? If not now, when? I want you all to answer that question, not ask anymore. Because that's the time when you have to say, it is me and it is now that I have to take action for gender equality and to change this world. Thank you.